Welcome back to Real Estate Radio San Antonio on 930 The Answer. And you're listening to Real Estate Radio San Antonio with Carla and Stan. And we have our special guest here, Scott Smalley from Keller Williams Legacy. And, you know, we've got a really interesting topic this afternoon. Scott has a designation as a certified real estate divorce specialist. And it's kind of something that I think in our industry we kind of skip over or skip around. We really don't want to talk about because it can be an ugly situation, ugly matter to deal with, but it's something that really needs professional help. And Scott, I just thank you for coming on the show and sharing this with us, because this is just something that people need to understand. And that's what we want to do on this show is to bring out all the information that will help everyone to become more educated in real estate. And, you know, divorce can be a financial disaster for people. And unfortunately, that's one of the things we go through. And so we're really looking forward to your input and to guide us a little bit about some of the information that goes on here and what that certification means.
Well, great. Well, thank you. Yeah, it is pretty unique. There aren't a lot of real estate divorce specialists out there. It's a fairly new designation. And it's yet to be recognized by the National Association of Realtors, but it was put together by a CFP, a Certified Financial Planner in Colorado Springs, and she worked in conjunction with a family practice attorney, and they put the program together. And while it is offered as mandatory continuing education for CFPs, it hasn't received that yet for realtors. But I looked at that and saw it as an underserved market, and like I've mentioned, having been through a couple of myself, and just realized what a challenge it was to face that. You know, just aside from the fact that you have two people that had come together that now don't want to be, and then how to dispose of the marital assets, and just being a guy, from a guy's perspective, it's a little bit different. I know that when a woman, typically she's getting together with their friends and they have their wine fest and everything, and that's all cool. But from a guy's perspective, you start complaining about your divorce, you're considered whiny, and you're kind of called from the pack. So
I see.
it's a little different perspective there. But just going through it, I did not know who to turn to, other than attorneys, and they're so busy and they don't have time, and there's a lot of things that you think about but you don't really know who to talk to, and that's where I was kind of hoping to help fill that void for whichever side or both sides.
Absolutely.
Actually.
Wow.
And while it can be a challenge, I'm a little picky about the clients I do take on, in that they both have to want to do this.
Right.
I refuse to get in the middle of an adversarial situation, because that just creates more problems than it solves. But as long as these two people want to come together one last time to do something good and right, then we make it about the house. It's not about this side or that side. It's about the house, and it's about the property, and it's about doing it right, and bringing a different professional element into making it happen, so that it'll work, and make it as painless as possible under the circumstances.
Do they ever, when you're working with someone, do they ever look at you as legal advice, or just trying to, it's kind of a fine line, isn't it?
It truly is.
Yeah.
It truly is. But it's somewhat congruent with being a realtor. I mean, when we're showing houses and talking with buyers, for instance, there's the disclaimer in our rep agreement that we're not a surveyor, we're not an engineer, we're not an inspector, and we're not all these things. However, we have that knowledge where we can kind of point these things out so that the client can discuss with the profession in that field. And it's very similar to that, too, on the divorce aspect. I'm certainly not an attorney. I'm certainly not an insurance specialist. I'm certainly not a financial expert. But I've learned enough through the training to realize when I need to direct those people to talk to those experts, and just to kind of work more as a guide, and directing them to where they really need to go to get the right answers.
Kind of be in the middle. You can't play favorites.
Exactly, and that's part of the training to get the designation. And it seems so simple and so silly, but for instance, one of the things we're taught is that when you're doing email correspondence with your clients, you have to change up who gets the first billing on the email address. So if it goes to him first, then it goes to her first next email. So it doesn't show like there's any type of favoritism whatsoever. And it can be difficult, I imagine, for some just to emotionally divest themselves from what's going on around them, and not to come across as a Star Trek Mr. Spock or anything like that, but you just have to divest yourself of the emotion so that you don't get embroiled into what's happening. And if you just go at it simply with a straight focus that this is about the house, this is about the property, it's not about who said this to whom or any of
what
that.
happened to start all of this.
I just don't get into that.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things here that you talked about was the, you know, that you're not an attorney and you're not, you know, these other professionals. Do you have those people on board or acquaintances with you or referral partners that you can help guide them to in this situation? Or is that something someone has to find, or can they look to you for some of that help? Or
I can give that direction. Again, it's a very, very similar to my everyday realtor practice, where I can refer inspectors and lenders and things like that. And it's similar to in this divorce. Usually, when I'm involved, though, they already have their own attorneys lined up. That's typical. However, if they don't have a CPA or some other financial expert, there are folks that I can draw from to share.
We were supposed to have a divorce attorney on the show today, so we could cut a dialogue back and forth. But he'll be on the show next week, and we'll kind of, you know, segue through this show into the next one, kind of about what advice to give to two people that have decided, you know, that, you know, they're going to split their assets and go on their merry ways. So, so is there like, I mean, there's a lot of expense when it comes to divorce to begin with.
Right.
Yeah, and so in terms of guarantee a specific result, I mean, you don't guarantee. How can you guarantee?
No, you certainly can't. That would never come into the equation.
Yeah.
That would be a dangerous area to tread. However, as the trusted realtor in this, sometimes it's not in their best interest to sell the house. And what I would do in that case is just point out to them, you really need to talk to your attorney about this, because especially if, for instance, there are children involved. And if the stability of and the well-being of the child is equally important to both, it may better serve that soon-to-be divided family that one of the parents, stay in that house until that youngest child graduates from high school. And that would serve a couple of different purposes, actually. One, it maintains the continuity for the children. Secondly, rather than having to rush into an emotional decision to sell the house and perhaps take a loss on it, come to the closing table having to pay someone to buy their house, they could take that time and still continue to build equity into it. And then they would actually have something to divide and share when the house eventually sells. So it's just, that is something, but oftentimes, unless a party brings it up to the attorney, it may not come into the conversation.
That's right. And so if you've not experienced anything like that, it's hard to advise someone. And if you haven't got the certification, it's hard to remember things like that that they may not think of, or another agent, realtor may not think of, and they're just so you could give them advice to speak through their attorney and maybe go a different direction, rather than selling the house and losing money and changing the kids' school and that kind of thing. Yeah. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real Estate Radio San Antonio, and that's realestateradiosa.com. You're listening, our special guest is Scott Small from Keller Williams Legacy. And we're talking about his Certified Real Estate Divorce Specialist designation that he has on this segment. And then next, we're going to have another one on historic. So you have to stay tuned. Scott, tell us, do you have any stories, any good stories from previous clients?
Well, I do have one in particular. It was a nice young couple. They had a family. They had made the decision. They did want to sell the house. Mom was going to take the children and go to Corpus, and the husband was going to stay and work the oil fields. And this was back a few years ago before our market had improved, and they were upside down in their house. And it looked like they were going to have to come to the table with money, again, to pay someone to buy their house. And what I had learned was, and I know you're familiar with it, but it was a wraparound mortgage opportunity where we had found a buyer that they were unable to qualify. They had the money, but by the standards, they couldn't qualify to get a mortgage and purchase the home. So we were able to bring those two parties together, and instead of that husband and wife divorcing and having to take a loss on their house, we were able to maneuver that into a wraparound mortgage type situation where the buyer came to the table, put down a substantial down payment, and at the end of the day, the bills were paid, and each, the estranged husband and wife, walked away with $1,000 in their pocket. So going from what could have been a catastrophic, financially catastrophic situation, it ended up a little happier than what it could have been.
Oh. Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's creative.
It was.
Because not everybody even knows about wraparounds.
And a lot of agents are scared just because they've not heard about it. But it's perfectly legal when it's done right, and we had the proper attorneys involved and the proper paperwork done, and it worked out well for everyone.
That's awesome. And one of the other things I think is being a certified real estate divorce specialist designation. I mean, through that process, you learn to work with both parties, and in the end event, really ultimately, doesn't it save them money?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I had mentioned earlier, I don't want to get into the middle of it if one of them is adversarial to selling, because it just wastes so much money and it hurts people in the long run. And that's not why I'm here. Try to help people and get through it with as little pain as possible.
Yeah, replacing fear and apprehension with knowledge. And
Right.
I know you do an excellent job, and that's why you're on our show.
Well, thank
so
you.
we appreciate you being here. How is the one last question before we go to break? You got about 10 seconds.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Is how is the sale of a divorce of real estate different than just a traditional one?
You know what? Let's hold
It's going
that
to take
right
more than
now.
10 seconds.
Let's hold that right there, Scott. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back. You're listening to Real Estate Radio San Antonio with Carla and Stan, and we're going to be back with Scott here in a few minutes, and he's going to answer that. How is the sale of a divorce real estate different from that of traditional real estate? We'll see you in just a couple moments.